Welcome to our channel, Aportes Afrocostarricenses y Diaspóricos. In our section, In Conversation With, we have Professor Delroy Barton, our facilitador cultural, and he will be speaking to us about the contribution of August celebration to the Afro Costa Rican community. Professor Barton, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carmen. A warm greeting to all our listeners. And indeed, it's a pleasure to refer to this celebration of the 31st of August. In a conversation with the UNIA president of Jamaica last Sunday, it was interesting to analyze how that celebration is taken in account, especially the previous celebration of emancipation, which serves as an introduction to the 31st of August. And he was describing that this great event with Marcus Mosiah Garvey that took place in Madison Square Garden on the whole month of August 100 years ago. That this celebration gathered outstanding leaders of the Black community from all over the world who could make it to New York at Madison Square Garden. And there, the Declaration of the Rights of the Negro People of the World was signed. This was in 1920, exactly 100 years this 31st of August. This declaration, which today you can consider as the Declaration of Human Rights, was far before the United Nations existed. 28 years before the United Nations started operating, these human rights were phrased and issued and delivered officially to the existing organization of that time, which was the League of Nations. And this particular issue sometimes just taken for granted. And when we celebrate the 31st of August, it's important to really highlight what this celebration really means. The first to take in account is that it was the moment that Black leaders of the world had to express and complain to the society as a whole of the things that were not right with the treatment that Black people received. For instance, the first complaint was that nowhere in the world, with few exceptions, are Black men accorded equal treatment with white men, although in the same situation and circumstances, but on the contrary, are discriminated against and denied the common rights due to human beings for no other reason than their race and color. This first complaint, one can describe that there were approximately 35 complaints to introduce the Declaration of Human Rights. It's one that should be should not be erased from our minds, that 100 years after that declaration, very little has changed. So with this introduction, it's important to outline what the 31st of August celebration has meant to Costa Ricans and has accomplished in this country. There was a question raised in certain discussions about how this date was celebrated previously. We know that the UNIA branch 300, the official representation of Negroes organization in the world, especially in Costa Rica, the UNIA building cornerstone states that the cornerstone was laid in 1929, which means that after that, maybe 2 years after, is when that Liberty Hall structure was edificated. But from the moment the movement began here in Costa Rica, the Declaration of Human Rights established that the 31st of August should be considered as a national holiday in the world. And this particular definition of a national holiday in the world is the reason why this date has been celebrated ever since. So roughly we can state that before 1929, it was being celebrated because it was recently established as a worldwide celebration. And so far, the type of celebrations, as far as I have learned, was that the flag of the UNIA was raised and the highest authority in Limon would be invited at dawn, about 6, to take part in the raising of the UNIA flag and the Costa Rican flag. So this celebration has been as a normal practice from the 1930s. The celebration was limited basically to the areas where the UNIA existed. And as we know, there were more than 20 branches of the UNIA operating in Limon. There still is a rebuilt facility in Old Harbor and the facility of the Liberty Hall in Limon. But in the major districts, there was also physical presence of Liberty Hall that in some cases was where English schools were taught. there aren't any sign of the existence of those buildings, and luckily that legacy has been lost. But it's important also to describe that even though at that time Negroes in Costa Rica were not considered as nationals, the effort, the resources, and the time that that population managed to gather to build Liberty Hall in those days, where we know that their income wasn't that high, but the sense of pride, the sense of togetherness made it possible for these issues to be present. There was no support from the UNIA out of the country. All these physical liberty halls was the contribution of the Black population then. And this should serve to illustrate that the sense of unity in those days was very strong. To have a physical legacy of the UNIA through these liberty halls. So in summary, the celebration has been a real event for more than 70 years in Costa Rica.
Aho, iya, aho, aho.